My hands shook as I reached for Zarek Nightvale's tie, the silk cool against my fingertips despite the unnatural chill radiating from his skin. 6 weeks I'd worked in this estate. 6 weeks of keeping my eyes down and my pulse steady in a house where heartbeats were invitations. But tonight was different. The grand foyer smelled of beeswax candles and something metallic I'd learned not to identify. Moonlight painted the marble floor in silver and shadow. The chandelier above us held dozens of flickering flames that danced across surfaces I'd polished that morning, back when the house still slept its daylight sleep. "Higher," Zarek said, his voice low and precise, vibrating with something that made my survival instincts scream run. Not that running would matter. I'd learned quickly that stillness kept you alive longer than flight. I adjusted the Windsor knot, my knuckles grazing the white shirt beneath. His skin felt like marble, smooth, cold, perfect in a way nothing living could achieve. The platinum hair fell across his shoulder like moonlight made solid, and his crimson eyes held the weight of centuries I couldn't comprehend. "There," I said, smoothing the tie flat against his chest, forcing my voice steady. "Perfect," he murmured, those ancient eyes meeting mine for one heartbeat too long. Most staff had learned to look at his shoulder, his collar, anywhere but directly into that gaze. But I discovered something useful. Meeting his eyes meant he sometimes remembered you were more than furniture. That's when I saw it through the doorway behind him. Owen, the driver who'd served the Night Vale household for 3 years, adjusting something beneath his coat. The bright exterior light caught the silver edge of metal as he shifted position. My heart stuttered. Owen always maintained perfect posture, perfect protocol. But not like this. Not with his hand positioned for a draw, his stance too rigid, the body language of someone preparing for violence. And not with that metallic gleam visible in his coat. Silver. I kept my expression neutral, my hands still resting against Zarek's tie. Years of watching my parents navigate the supernatural world, before the rogue vampires came, had taught me how to read predators, how to become invisible when necessary and bold when survival demanded it. "Your driver has a gun," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "Don't get in the car." Zarek's entire body went motionless beneath my hands, not rigid like a human's, but utterly, preternaturally still. His eyes, which had held mild interest, became something primordial. The temperature around us dropped. "What did you say?" I didn't repeat myself. Instead, I stepped back, picked up the clothes brush from the hall table, and ran it over his shoulders as though this were routine. "Owen," I said, my voice barely audible. "Hip holster. Silver. Wrong hand position. He keeps checking the car, then his watch. Wrong body language for your regular detail." Zarek's jaw tightened, the only sign that something living still existed beneath that immortal exterior. For a long moment he said nothing, and I wondered if I'd just made the last mistake of my very short life. "Lucia," he called out, his voice carrying that supernatural resonance that made every servant in the house stop moving. A woman appeared from the shadowed corridor, moving liquid and silent. Lucia Night Vale, his maker, his advisor, ancient beyond measure. "Delay the car," Zarek said, his gaze still fixed on my face. "Tell Owen I require a different route assessment." Lucia's eyebrows rose fractionally, the vampire equivalent of shock. She looked at me, then back to Zarek, then at the doorway where Owen stood. "My king. Now." Lucia disappeared with inhuman speed. Through the window, I watched her approach Owen. His face remained neutral, but his hand shifted. Barely, but enough. Enough for Zarek to notice. He moved faster than my eyes could process. One moment before me, the next at the doorway, his hand locked around Owen's wrist with crushing force. The silver weapon clattered to the ground, bullets scattering across the stone like fallen stars, each one gleaming with that telltale sheen meant to end something eternal. "Wait in my study," Zarek said without turning, his voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "Don't leave. Don't talk to anyone." The study was a room I'd only glimpsed through cracked doorways, all dark wood paneling and leather-bound books that predated my country's founding. Now I stood inside it, watching Zarek settle into the chair behind his desk with the fluid grace of a predator who'd forgotten what it meant to be prey. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. I sat, spine straight, hands folded in my lap. Through the tall windows behind him, I could see Owen's body being carried away by security.
No ceremony, no hesitation.
Just efficient removal of a problem solved. "Tell me about Elena," Zarek said, his crimson eyes fixed on mine. "The cook." I blinked. "She's worked here for 8 years. She has a daughter in university. Her tells when she lies." I paused, remembering. "She touches her left ear. She did it twice last week when the wine inventory came up short." "And Thomas? The groundskeeper?" "He favors his right leg on cold nights. Old injury, probably. He's been taking longer routes to avoid the East Garden stairs." Zarek leaned back, something almost like satisfaction crossing his features. "How many times has Lady Saraphene visited in your 6 weeks here?" 3 times. Always unannounced. She never eats or drinks what's offered, and her security detail checks the perimeter before she enters. "She doesn't trust you." "No," he agreed, "she doesn't." "And you noticed all of this while scrubbing floors and polishing silver?" "Invisible people see everything," I said quietly. "You taught me that." His eyebrow arched. "I taught you. You watch everyone too. I've seen you catalog every person who enters a room, every shift in posture, every hesitation. You've been doing it so long you don't even realize anymore." I met his gaze directly. "We're not that different. You became invisible by living too long. I became invisible by being too breakable." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the clock's ticking, a sound that meant something different to each of us. "Owen wasn't working alone," Zarek said finally. "The silver bullets were custom-made. Expensive. Someone in my own council wanted me dead." He stood, moving to the window. "I need someone who sees what others miss. Someone the court will underestimate because they're human. Someone who understands survival. You're offering me a position. Personal attendant and advisor. You'll move to the main wing. Attend council meetings. Report directly to me." He turned, and for the first time, I saw something in his expression that looked almost like uncertainty. "You'll also paint a target on your back the size of this estate." I thought of the servant quarters, the cold, the constant fear, my sister's medical bills I could barely cover. I thought of Owen's silver bullets and Lady Saraphene's calculating smile. "When do I start?" His lips curved into something that might have been a smile on someone who remembered how. "You already have." The council chamber existed in the oldest part of the estate, where even moonlight seemed reluctant to enter. I followed Zarek down stone corridors lit by torches that had burned for centuries, my new dress, deep burgundy silk that cost more than a year's wages, whispering against the floor. "Stay behind my right shoulder," Zarek instructed without turning. "Speak only when I acknowledge you. And whatever happens, don't show fear." "I'm human in a room full of apex predators," I said quietly. "Not showing fear isn't the same as not feeling it." "I know." He stopped at a massive iron door carved with symbols I couldn't read. "That's why I'm counting on your survival instincts." The door opened, and silence fell like a guillotine blade. The chamber was circular, dominated by a round table of black marble. 12 vampires sat in high-backed chairs, each one radiating the kind of power that made the air itself feel heavy. They turned as one, their eyes tracking me with the focused intensity of predators spotting wounded prey. Zarek took his seat at the head of the table. I moved to stand behind his right shoulder, hands clasped, posture perfect. Zarek, a woman's voice cut through the silence, like a blade wrapped in honey. You've brought your dinner to council? How unconventional. Lady Saraphene sat directly across from Zarek, and she was devastating in the way ancient things often were, beautiful and terrible and wrong in some fundamental way. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves, her dress was midnight blue silk, and her smile held the warmth of a winter grave. Lady Saraphene, Zarek said evenly. May I introduce my personal attendant and advisor, Caroline Palmer? The temperature in the room dropped. Several vampires exchanged glances. One, a broad-shouldered man with silver threading through his dark hair, leaned forward with interest. Advisor. Saraphene's laugh was musical and cruel. Since when do we take counsel for meals? What's next, Zarek? Consulting the livestock on agricultural policy? Careful, Saraphene, Zarek replied, his voice carrying an edge that made several council members shift. Your age is showing. Some of us have evolved beyond viewing humans as nothing but sustenance. Evolution, interrupted the silver-haired vampire, or weakness. Lord Matthias, of the Northern Territories. I confess curiosity about this innovation. I watched Matthias as he spoke, noting how his eyes flicked to Saraphene before settling on Zarek. How her fingers drummed once against the table, a signal I'd seen my brother use when coordinating with his crew. How Matthias's slight nod was almost imperceptible. The meeting proceeded with the business of territorial disputes and resource allocation. I remained silent, watching. Saraphene proposed a motion to limit individual house authority in favor of collective council governance. It sounded reasonable, democratic even. But I noticed how Matthias seconded it immediately. How 3 other vampires who'd exchanged glances with Saraphene earlier shifted in preparation to vote in favor. I leaned down, lips close to Zarek's ear. Matthias and Saraphene. Coordinated signals. This vote was planned before the meeting. For others are with them. The woman in green, the twin males at the far end, the one who hasn't spoken. If this passes, you lose more than authority. Zarek's jaw tightened fractionally. He stood, commanding immediate attention. An interesting proposal, Lady Saraphene. However, I notice Lord Matthias seems remarkably prepared to support legislation he supposedly just heard. Almost as if discussions happened outside official channels. His gaze swept the table. Which violates our own protocols about shadow alliances, does it not? The silence that followed was different now. Uncertain, dangerous. Saraphene's smile never wavered, but her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that promised future pain. How observant, she said softly. Your little pet has teeth after all. I found the balcony off the library by accident, drawn by the way moonlight spilled through the glass doors like an invitation. The forest beyond the estate stretched dark and endless, and somewhere in those trees, 15 years ago, my world had ended. You're supposed to be resting. Zarek's voice came from behind me, quiet enough not to startle. The council session was taxing. I've had worse nights, I said, not turning. At least no one actually tried to drain me. Saraphene considered it. He moved to stand beside me, his presence a cold contrast to the spring air. Matthias talked her out of it. For now. We stood in silence, watching the wind move through the trees like invisible hands. My parents died in that forest, I said finally. 15 years ago. Rogue vampires passing through. Wrong place, wrong time. I hid in a hollow tree and listened to them scream. Zarek's stillness became something different, not the predator's patience, but the weight of recognition. The travelers, he said quietly. 3 of them. Spring of 2009. They left bodies at the forest edge. My breath caught. You knew. I executed them 2 days later. They'd violated territorial laws, broken the accords about human hunting. His jaw tightened. I never knew their victims had left a daughter behind. If I had, you would have done what? Taken in a traumatized 9-year-old. I turned to face him. I've spent 15 years afraid of what you are. Turns out you've been protecting me longer than I've been serving you. Protection isn't the same as justice. I can't give you back what they took. No, I agreed. But you gave me revenge, even if I never knew it. That's something. Zarek leaned against the balcony railing, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost human in his exhaustion. I was made against my will, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. 1,000 years ago, in a world that doesn't exist anymore, a woman I trusted held me down while her coven turned me into this. Is she long dead? I made certain of it. His eyes met mine, and I saw something raw there. I've spent 10 centuries trying to be more than the monster that was created. Some nights, I think I've succeeded. Other nights, I look at what I am and wonder if redemption is even possible. I thought about Owen's body being carried away, about Saraphene's cruel smile, about the casual way these immortals discussed human lives like discussing livestock. You asked me to stay when you could have just commanded it, I said. You warned me about the danger when you could have just used me. You executed those vampires for breaking laws most of your kind probably thought were inconvenient suggestions. I stepped closer. Monsters don't question if they're monsters. And what does that make me? Someone trying. Same as me. I looked back at the forest. We're both shaped by violence we didn't choose. Both trying to survive in a world that wants us to be something we're not. You're supposed to be the heartless king. I'm supposed to be the invisible servant. Yet here we stand, Zarek said quietly. Two people who refuse to play their assigned roles. The moonlight caught his platinum hair, softened the ancient hardness of his features. For a moment, he looked less like the vampire king, and more like someone who'd forgotten what it meant to be seen as anything other than a threat. Thank you, I said, for avenging them, even if you didn't know who they were. Thank you, he replied, for reminding me why I still try to be more than what I was made to be. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper, the handwriting elegant and precise. T. My quarters. Sunset. Do not be late. Lucia. I'd never been to the East Wing where Lucia Nightvale kept her private rooms. The corridor leading there felt older than the rest of the estate, as though time itself moved differently in her presence. She answered my knock before I could finish knocking. Punctual, she observed, stepping aside. That's something, at least. Her sitting room was museum-perfect, antique furniture that belonged in history books, paintings I recognized from art classes, a tea service that looked Ming Dynasty. Lucia gestured to the chair across from her, and I sat, watching as she poured tea into a single cup and placed it in front of me. You're not joining me? I asked. I haven't consumed anything but blood in 800 years. This is for your comfort, not mine. She settled into her chair with the fluid grace they all possessed. Though I suspect you're not particularly comfortable regardless. I lifted the cup, buying time. The tea was perfect, jasmine and honey, exactly the right temperature. You want to know if I'll betray him, I said. Lucia's smile was sharp.
Direct.
I appreciate that. Yes, Caroline Palmer. I want to know if you're brave enough to love a monster or foolish enough to think you can change one. There was another human, I said, before me. Helena. Lucia's expression hardened. Beautiful, clever, charming. Zarek cared for her deeply, against my advice. She seemed devoted, grateful for his protection. She paused. She was feeding information to vampire hunters for 3 years. When they finally struck, we lost 37 coven members in a single night. Some of them were my children. Vampires I'd turned myself, nurtured for centuries. The tea suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. Zarek found her in the aftermath. Lucia continued, her voice like winter frost. She begged for forgiveness, claimed they'd threatened her family. He executed her himself. Quickly, mercifully, which was more than she deserved. Her ancient eyes fixed on me. That was 80 years ago. You're the first human he's allowed close since. So I'll ask again. Are you brave or foolish? I set down the teacup carefully. I don't want to change him. I've seen what he is, the violence, the immortality, the power. Trying to change that would be like trying to change the ocean. Pointless and arrogant. Then what do you want? To understand him. To see the person inside the monster and the monster inside the person. To be someone who sees both and stays anyway. I met her gaze directly. I'm not Helena. My loyalty isn't for sale, and I don't make promises I can't keep. But I won't apologize for being human, and I won't pretend that doesn't make me vulnerable. Lucia studied me for a long moment, and I felt the weight of centuries in that gaze. Lady Saraphene is obsessed with him, she said finally. Has been for 300 years. He rejected her advances repeatedly, chose leadership over her companionship. She views you as theft, something that belongs to her being claimed by prey. Lucia leaned forward. She won't stop with political maneuvering. She'll come for you directly, and she'll make it hurt. I know. And you're staying anyway?
I'm staying anyway.
Lucia's smile was fractionally less cold. Then perhaps you're both brave and foolish. That might be exactly what he needs. The diplomatic gathering was supposed to be neutral ground, representatives from 5 covens discussing territorial boundaries over wine that cost more than cars. I stood in my usual position behind Zarek's chair, watching the room with the trained awareness Lucia had spent 3 weeks drilling into me. That's when I noticed the servers. New faces, all of them. The regular staff had been reassigned last minute, according to the head of household. A scheduling conflict, they'd said. I leaned down. The servers. All new. All male. All watching you, not the guests they're serving. Zarek's hand tightened fractionally on his wine glass. How many? 6. No, 7. 1 in the corridor. He stood smoothly, drawing every eye in the room. My apologies, but I've just remembered urgent business requiring. The first server moved with inhuman speed, silver blade flashing in the candlelight. Zarek dodged, but 2 more attackers appeared from behind the curtains. The room erupted into chaos, guests scattering, security mobilizing, the crash of priceless china hitting marble floors. I saw the pattern immediately. Every attacker targeted Zarek specifically, moving in coordinated strikes designed to corner him, to limit his supernatural speed. This wasn't a random assault. This was an execution. One assassin broke from the pack, heading for the corridor, trying to cut off Zarek's escape route. An idea formed, terrible and necessary. I ran. Caroline. Zarek's voice carried over the sounds of combat, but I was already in the corridor, letting the assassin see me. His eyes locked onto mine. Easy prey, separated from protection. He changed direction, following. I led him deeper into the east wing, toward the narrow gallery where Lucia had taught me the estate's defensive positions. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears, my breath coming fast. Behind me, footsteps that moved too quickly to be human. The assassin caught my arm, spinning me around. Silver blade raised. Then Zarek's security materialized from the hidden alcoves, for vampires moving as one, disarming and subduing the attacker in seconds. Lucia herself appeared, her expression carved from ice. Saraphene's work, she said, examining the silver blade. bloodstone coven markers on the hilt. I sagged against the wall, adrenaline making my hands shake. Zarek appeared at the corridor's end, moving toward me with controlled urgency. Blood streaked his face, a shallow cut across his cheekbone that should have healed instantly, but didn't, the silver keeping the wound open. "You used yourself as bait," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It worked. You could have died. So could you." I pushed off the wall, legs unsteady. "That's why I did it." Lucia cleared her throat. "I'll coordinate cleanup and interrogation. You two should not be in a corridor." She disappeared, taking the captured assassin and security detail with her. We stood in the sudden silence, too close, the air between us charged with something that had been building for weeks. "You're bleeding," I said quietly, reaching up to examine the wound. My fingers touched his face, cold skin and warm blood. "Silver takes longer to heal." "I know," but he didn't move away. I could see his eyes tracking my pulse point, the way his jaw tightened. This close, I could see the fangs extending slightly, an involuntary response to blood, to proximity, to whatever this was between us. "You should step back," he said, voice rough. "I'm not entirely in control right now." When are any of us entirely in control? I stayed where I was, my hand still against his face. "You're always so careful. Always stopping yourself. Always choosing to be better than what you were made to be." "Caroline, I see you, Zarek. The monster and the man. The king and the person who was turned against his will. I see all of it." I met his crimson eyes directly. "And I'm not afraid." He leaned down slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You should be," he whispered. "I know." The kiss was soft at first, careful, controlled, his fangs retracted through sheer force of will. The kiss deepened, and I felt the sharp edge of his fangs against my lip, not breaking skin but present, a reminder of what he was. I didn't pull away. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, though only one of us needed to breathe, he rested his forehead against mine. "This is dangerous," he said. "Everything about this is dangerous," I replied. "That's not new. I mean for you. Saraphene will use this. Use you. Let her try." I smiled despite everything. "I'm harder to kill than I look." His laugh was quiet, almost surprised.
Yes.
"You really are." We met in the spaces between official existence, the library after midnight, the abandoned ballroom where dust motes danced in moonlight, the private gardens where even the security patrols knew not to look too closely. "You're counting steps," Zarek observed, one hand at my waist as we moved through a waltz in the empty ballroom. "Stop thinking. Just feel the music."
"There is no music," I pointed out.
"Then feel me." His hand tightened slightly, guiding me through a turn. "Trust that I won't let you fall." I stopped counting. We moved together in the silence, and for those stolen moments, the world consisted of nothing but the two of us and the moonlight streaming through tall windows. Later, in the library, I read to him from a book of poetry my mother had given me, worn pages and faded ink, words about love and loss and the beautiful tragedy of temporary things. "Your voice changes when you read," he said, stretched out on the sofa like a cat, eyes closed. Less guarded. "Maybe because these are the words I choose, not the ones required of me." He opened his eyes, that crimson gaze finding mine. "You're always choosing, Caroline. Even when you serve tea at council meetings, you're choosing how to present yourself, what to reveal, what to keep hidden. You're one of the most deliberate people I've ever known." "I've had to be." I set the book aside. Survival has always required calculation. Not with me. He sat up, the movement fluid. "Not anymore." The night he asked about bloodsharing, his voice carried a hesitation I'd never heard before. In vampire culture, he explained, taking blood is often violent, transactional. But sharing blood with permission, with trust, that's intimacy. That's sacred.
He paused.
I would never ask if you're not. Yes, I interrupted. His eyes widened fractionally. You don't have to. I know. I'm choosing to. I tilted my head, exposing my throat. I trust you. The bite was sharp but brief, his fangs precise. But it was what came after that mattered. The way he held me carefully, the reverence in his touch, the connection that felt deeper than physical. When he pulled back, his eyes had darkened to something nearly black. This changes things, he whispered against my skin. Things were already changed. But secrecy has a cost, and privacy in a house full of predators is an illusion. The rumors started small. A kitchen maid who noticed my absence during certain hours, a security guard who mentioned the ballroom's recently disturbed dust. By the third council meeting, I could feel the weight of knowing looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Saraphene's smile had gained a knife's edge. Your advisor looks tired, Zarek. Perhaps the responsibilities are too demanding for someone so delicate. Zarek's response was immediate, and it cut deeper than her barb. Caroline will be transitioning to archival work in the library. Effective immediately. I kept my expression neutral through the rest of the meeting, but inside, something cracked. He found me in the library the next evening, surrounded by century-old ledgers that smelled of decay and forgotten things. You know why I had to do that, he said without preamble. To protect me. I understand the strategy. I didn't look up from the ledger. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt to be hidden away like something shameful. You're not, he stopped, frustration evident. If they know how much you matter, they'll use you. Saraphene is already watching, waiting for any excuse to. To what? I'm already a target, Zarek. Being your advisor made me visible. Being your whatever I am to you, that's not going to change just because you've reassigned me to dusty books and ancient inventories. Then what do you want me to do? His voice carried an edge of desperation. Announce to the council that I've fallen in love with a human? Give Saraphene exactly the ammunition she needs. The silence that followed was deafening. You love me? I asked quietly. He laughed, the sound bitter. Is that really in question? I've broken every protocol, abandoned centuries of careful distance, and risked my political standing for you. What else would you call it? I'd call it complicated. I finally looked at him. I'd call it dangerous and beautiful and terrifying. I'd call it the thing that's going to get one or both of us killed, if we're not careful. Are you saying we should stop? I'm saying I don't want to be your secret shame. I don't want stolen moments and hidden kisses, and you publicly treating me like I'm just another servant. I stood, facing him fully. I understand the danger. I accept it. But I won't accept being loved in private and dismissed in public. I deserve better than that. His expression shifted, pain, recognition, something that looked like respect. You're right, he said finally. You deserve everything. And I'm not sure I know how to give you that without destroying everything I've built. Then maybe, I said softly, it's time to build something new. The Continental Summit required Zarek's attendance, 3 days in Prague with the oldest vampires on the continent, discussing territories and treaties that predated nations. He tripled security before leaving, positioned Lucia as my personal guard, made me promise not to leave the manor's protected grounds.
Ide promisa.
I'd meant it. But security is only as strong as its weakest link, and someone had found that weakness. I was cataloging manuscripts in the library's restricted section when I noticed the smell, sweet, chemical, wrong. By the time I turned, Maria from the kitchen staff stood in the doorway, her expression blank, eyes dilated. Maria? I backed away slowly. What's? She wasn't alone. 3 vampires emerged from the shadows, moving with coordinated precision. I ran for the panic button Zarek had installed, but my legs suddenly felt disconnected, the world tilting sideways. The sedative hit my system like a freight train. The last thing I heard was Maria's flat voice. "I'm sorry. They have my son." I woke to darkness and the smell of old stone. My head throbbed, my mouth tasted like copper, and every muscle felt like it had been replaced with lead. Slowly, sensation returned. I was sitting in a chair, wrists bound, in a room lit by flickering torches. Finally awake. Saraphene's voice came from somewhere behind me. "I was beginning to worry we'd dosed you too heavily. That would have ruined the artistry of this." She circled into view, her beauty as sharp and cold as ever. We were in some kind of dungeon, ancient stone walls, iron fixtures, the kind of place that had seen centuries of suffering. Where am I? Bloodstone's stronghold. Very old, very secure, very far from anyone who might interrupt us. She crouched down to my eye level, her smile predatory. Zarek is currently 500 miles away, performing diplomatic theater with fossils who still think lineage matters more than power. By the time he realizes you're gone, this will all be finished. "If you're going to kill me, just do it." Saraphene laughed, the sound genuinely delighted. "Kill you? Oh, Caroline, you misunderstand completely. Death would be mercy, and I'm not feeling particularly merciful." She stood, pacing in a slow circle. "No, I'm going to give you exactly what every human secretly wants: immortality.
Power.
Freedom from that fragile, breakable body." My blood ran cold.
No. Yes.
But here's the beautiful part. I'm going to do it wrong. Her eyes glittered with malice. A proper turning requires preparation, control, the maker's careful guidance. Without that, the new vampire goes feral, mindless. A rabid animal that attacks anything that moves, knows nothing but hunger and rage. She leaned close, her breath cold against my face. "I'm going to turn you into a monster, then send you back to Zarek in a cage. A living reminder of what happens when vampires play with their food. He'll kill you for this. Perhaps. But first, he'll have to watch the woman he loves reduced to a snarling beast. He'll have to choose between destroying you himself or keeping you locked away forever, a grotesque parody of the relationship he thought he could have." Saraphene straightened, satisfaction evident in every line of her posture. 300 years I've waited for him to see reason, to choose a proper mate. Instead, he chooses prey. This is what he deserves. "You're insane. I'm patient. There's a difference." She nodded to someone behind me. "Begin the preparation. Slow, controlled doses of venom over the next 12 hours. I want her conscious for every moment of her humanity slipping away. I want her to feel herself becoming the thing she fears." The first injection burned through my veins like liquid fire. I bit down on my scream, refusing to give her the satisfaction. "Oh, this is going to be entertaining," Saraphene purred. "Most humans break within the first hour. Let's see how long the great advisor to the Vampire King can maintain her composure." I focused on Zarek's face, on Lucia's warnings, on every survival instinct I'd honed over 6 months in a world that wanted me dead. I just had to stay human long enough for rescue. The fire spread through my bloodstream, and I began counting seconds, then minutes, then anything to keep my mind anchored to who I was. Before I became what she wanted to make me. The video arrived at the Prague summit via encrypted messenger, 30 seconds of me chained in a stone cell, Saraphene's voice explaining exactly what she planned to do. Lucia told me later that Zarek watched it once, his face expressionless, then left the summit without explanation or apology. 8 hours later, he walked through the gates of the Bloodstone stronghold. alone. I heard the commotion from my cell, urgent voices, running footsteps, the distinctive sound of a fortress preparing for battle that never came. Then Saraphene appeared, practically vibrating with triumph. "Your king has arrived," she said, unlocking my cell. "I want you to see this." She dragged me to the main hall, where her entire coven had assembled. At the center, Zarek stood surrounded by 50 vampires, any one of whom could kill him if Saraphene gave the order. His platinum hair was disheveled from travel, his clothes rumpled, but his expression remained carved from ice. Until he saw me. Then something cracked in that controlled facade. "She's unharmed," he said, and it wasn't a question, it was a command wrapped in desperation. "For now," Saraphene replied. She circled him slowly, a predator savoring the hunt. "But the preparations have begun. In another 6 hours, the venom will be irreversible. She'll transform whether I complete the ritual or not." I could feel it, the fire in my veins that had been building for 12 hours, changing something fundamental in my cells. Saraphene wasn't bluffing. "Name your price," Zarek said quietly. "Oh, I intend to." Saraphene's smile was radiant and terrible. "Kneel before me. Here, in front of my coven and the witnesses I've invited from the neutral territories. Acknowledge my superiority. Submit to Bloodstone authority." The hall went silent. Through the haze of venom-induced fever, I could see other vampires watching, representatives from covens that owed allegiance to neither Zarek nor Saraphene. This was being witnessed, recorded. Whatever happened here would reshape vampire politics for generations. "And if I do this," Zarek said, his voice carefully measured, "you'll reverse the transformation? Return her unharmed? You have my word before witnesses." Zarek's eyes found mine across the hall. I shook my head frantically, trying to convey everything. "Don't do this. Don't give her this victory. Don't break yourself for me." But he smiled, soft and sad, and I realized he'd already made his choice. He knelt. The sound that went through the assembled vampires was like a physical force, shock, disbelief, savage satisfaction from Saraphene's followers. Kings didn't kneel. Apex predators didn't submit. 1,000 years of pride ended in a gesture of love. And I realized this wasn't weakness at all. "No," I said, my voice raw but carrying. "I invoke blood challenge." Every eye turned to me. Saraphene's expression twisted with fury. "You have no standing to." "I have every standing." I pulled against my restraints, forcing myself upright despite the fire consuming me from inside. Lucia Nightvale spent 3 months teaching me vampire law. The ancient codes, the ones that predate your coven, that predate kingdoms. I looked at the neutral witnesses. Blood challenge can be invoked by any party claiming injustice, victim, advocate, or defender. If Lady Saraphene's cause is righteous, if Zarek truly deserves this humiliation, let her prove it in single combat witnessed by neutral covens. "That law hasn't been used in centuries," Saraphene hissed. "But it's still valid," I pressed. "Unless you're afraid to face him in honest combat? Easier to torture humans and demand submission than actually prove your superiority." The neutral vampires murmured among themselves. One stepped forward, ancient, distinguished, clearly important. "The human speaks truth," he said. "Blood challenge is ancient law. If invoked properly before witnesses, it cannot be refused without implications." Saraphene's face contorted. She couldn't refuse without looking like a coward in front of the exact audience she'd assembled to witness Zarek's humiliation. I'd turned her theater into a trial.
"Fine," she spat.
Challenge accepted. Tomorrow at sunset, witnessed and binding. Zarek stood slowly, and when his eyes met mine, I saw pride there, and love, and something that looked like hope. I'd bought us time. Now we just had to survive what came next. The blood challenge took place in the Bloodstone courtyard at sunset, ringed by witnesses from 7 covens. Torches cast dancing shadows across ancient stone as Zarek and Saraphene faced each other, 2 apex predators, centuries of resentment finally unleashed. When they clashed, it was breathtaking. Saraphene moved like water, her strikes precise and vicious. Zarek countered with the cold efficiency of someone who'd survived a millennium by never underestimating his enemies. They were too evenly matched, and I could feel the venom still burning through my veins, counting down to the moment I'd lose myself entirely. I couldn't wait for the fight to end naturally. Lucia materialized beside me, pressing a leather folder into my shaking hands. "Everything we've gathered," she whispered. "Use it now, while their attention is divided." I stepped forward into the firelight, chains rattling, fever making the world tilt. "Honored witnesses," my voice cut through the sound of combat, "I present evidence of crimes that supersede this challenge." The fighting stopped. Zarek and Saraphene froze mid-strike, every vampire turning to stare at the human who dared interrupt sacred ritual. I held up the documents with trembling hands. 3 unsanctioned territorial seizures in the last decade. 7 assassinations of rival coven leaders without trial or provocation. 42 humans killed in violation of the Continental Accords. I met the eyes of the neutral witnesses. All documented. All verified by independent sources. All punishable by final death under the very ancient laws Lady Saraphene claims to champion. "Lies," Saraphene hissed, but her voice carried a note of panic. "Then explain this." I pulled out a specific page. The execution of Lord Victor of the Northern Territories, officially recorded as a territorial dispute. Except 3 witnesses place you at the scene with silver weapons, and Victor's own blood heir testified before his mysterious disappearance. I looked directly at Saraphene's second-in-command, a broad-shouldered vampire named Christoph who'd served her for centuries. "Your testimony, actually," before she threatened your entire bloodline into silence. Christoph's expression shifted, shock, then recognition, then something that looked like liberation. He turned to Saraphene with centuries of suppressed rage in his eyes. 300 years, he said quietly. 300 years I've watched you pervert our coven's honor into your personal vendetta. No more. The ancient witness who'd acknowledged the blood challenge stepped forward, examining the evidence with methodical precision. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Lady Saraphene of Bloodstone Coven, you stand accused of multiple violations of ancient law. How do you answer?" Saraphene's beautiful face twisted into something monstrous. "This is a setup. The human is lying, the evidence fabricated." "The evidence includes your own correspondence," Lucia interrupted smoothly, appearing from the shadows. "Sealed with your personal sigil. Rather difficult to fabricate." The neutral witnesses conferred briefly. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. The sentence is final death, to be carried out immediately. Saraphene screamed, lunging not at her executioners, but at me. One last desperate attempt to take me with her. She never reached me. Her own coven members restrained her, holding her for the ancient witness who administered justice with swift, ceremonial precision. It was over in seconds. 3 centuries of tyranny ended. The council convened an emergency session 2 nights later. They expected to censure Zarek for the chaos his relationship with me had caused, to demand he return to proper separation between human and vampire. Instead, he stood before them with Lucia at his side and presented a proposal that made the ancient chamber erupt in argument. "Formalize human-vampire bonds under law," Zarek said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Establish protections for humans in vampire service. Create accountability structures for vampires who abuse their power. The old hierarchies are crumbling. We can evolve with purpose or cling to traditions that no longer serve us and watch our world die. This is madness, one council member protested. Humans are prey, not partners. Caroline Palmer orchestrated the downfall of one of our oldest covens, Lucia replied coolly, using nothing but observation, courage, and knowledge of our own laws. She's proven herself more capable than half this council. The question isn't whether humans can be partners, it's whether we're wise enough to recognize the strength in evolution. The debate raged for hours. But the evidence was undeniable. I'd accomplished what vampire politics hadn't managed in centuries. I'd exposed corruption, prevented civil war, and demonstrated that the old ways weren't the only ways. The vote was close. Too close.
But it passed.
Then came the choice that was mine alone. Zarek found me on the balcony where we'd first shared truths about trauma and survival. You don't have to decide now, he said quietly. You can remain human. Live your natural life. I'll protect you, ensure your safety and your sister's, for as long as you draw breath. And watch you stay frozen in time while I age and die. I turned to face him. Watch the world we're building continue without me? That's not protection, Zarek. That's a different kind of prison. Transformation isn't reversible. Once you choose this, there's no going back to sunlight, to mortality, to the human world you came from. The human world tried to make me invisible, I said. This world asked me to be brave. I know which one I choose. I visited my sister one final time, established trusts and protections that would ensure her security forever. She held my hand and told me she understood, that she'd always known I was meant for something bigger than the life we'd been given. The transformation ritual was public, ceremonial, revolutionary. The grand hall of Night Vale Manor filled with vampire nobility and, for the first time in recorded history, invited human dignitaries. Witnesses to a new era. Zarek performed the ritual himself, speaking the ancient words with reverence. When his fangs pierced my throat for the final time, it wasn't violence. It was rebirth. I woke 3 days later to a world transformed, colors impossibly vivid, sounds crystalline clear, every sensation magnified. But beneath the predator's new instincts, I still felt it. Empathy, compassion, the essential humanity that made me more than just another immortal hunter. 3 years passed. I stood in the same grand doorway where I'd once adjusted Zarek's tie with trembling hands, my heartbeat screaming danger. Now I wore a crown of white gold and platinum, simple and elegant and revolutionary. Queen consort to the vampire king, the first human ever elevated to stand beside immortal power as an equal. Night Vale Manor had become a symbol. Human liaisons served in advisory roles across vampire territories. The rigid hierarchies were evolving into something more complex, more collaborative. Change came slowly to immortal institutions, but it came. Zarek stood beside me, his hand finding mine. Both of us equally cold now, equally eternal. Any regrets? He asked. I looked out at the grounds where mixed patrols of vampires and humans worked side by side, where the sharp divisions between predator and prey had blurred into unprecedented cooperation. The maid who warned you about the gun was just trying to survive another night, I said. The queen standing here is trying to build something that lasts forever. No, I don't regret choosing forever. Our reign will be studied for centuries, Zarek said. Celebrated or condemned, depending on who writes the history. Then let's give them something worth writing about. I smiled, feeling the fangs that still sometimes surprised me. After all, we've already changed everything. Might as well see how far revolution can go. In the distance, the sun set over the forest where my parents had died, where my human life had ended, where everything had begun with a simple warning and a tie that needed adjusting. But I wasn't looking backward anymore. The monster and the maid. The king and the queen. The beautiful and the brutal. Finally in balance. The world had transformed as profoundly as I had. And we were just beginning. If this story of courage, transformation, and love that defied ancient laws moved you, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support helps us create more stories where the powerless become powerful, where love conquers fear, and where one brave choice changes everything. Thank you for being part of this journey.